a decent option. But if it were 2 weeks, 3 weeks, sure. But you're going to finish the year with a guy that almost certainly you're going to have for at the very most, like 8 games. Best case scenario. And for what? Unless it's because realistically you think you can win the Super Bowl. The other would be, do you sign Phillip Rivers because you need a veteran player to tutor along and grow a young player, a Riley Leonard, a Sam Ehlinger if he were to come back off of a practice squad? Or do you sign him and then bring him back next year to tutor along a young player that you're going to draft? Except for this. They are so painted into a corner. They are painted into a corner because they have given not 1 but 2 first-round picks away. So when you look at realistically, if you want to know the status of the Indianapolis Colts right now in December of 2025, and it's not entirely their fault. This is not me sitting here saying this is due to incompetence or due to negligence per se. In some areas, yes, but per se. A lot of this is because of injury. And it's not their fault. Injuries happen. You know that that's going to be, and you can't sit here and say they got caught with their pants down because at the beginning of the year, they had themselves a starting quarterback in Daniel Jones, and they had themselves a backup quarterback in Anthony Richardson that was one that you knew had some skill and flash about him. But who is your quarterback of the future? Your quarterback of the future, who knows? Because you've already mortgaged your future because of your belief in the quarterback that is now forcing you to go out and make a phone call to a guy selling white walls in Cleveland. I mean, I'd like to answer your call here, but I got a couple of kids I got to talk to real quick about a detention. I'll call you at 4:30. I mean, that's what it feels like, right? I believe, strictly my opinion, it is my belief, and Stephen Holder is going to join me at 2:30 today, and we can talk about this. But it is my belief that the Colts do not make this move and do not feel a sense to push in if they have total confidence that all of the brass is back next year and gets another year to push everything together again once they're healthy. I think they're pushing all in right now. In their defense, and to their credit, they are still within the play of making the postseason. But does it mean that they can make a play in the postseason? Or are you getting into the postseason because symbolically what it represents to put that on your resume because it's one of the things that people have been pining about, how this franchise has been void in that area? And you are getting ready for your final project to sit in front of the teacher, and you have to list out everything that you did and all the things that merit you being able to carry on next semester. To me, that's why you make this move. And if you were to put truth, and I get it, Phillip Rivers probably does give them a better chance to win. Even if Phillip Rivers has been doing nothing but eating Doritos for 4 years. Do you realize that he played last in the 2020 season? 2020 season. I saw and I'm not going to say any names because I don't want to be that guy, right? But I talked to yesterday a Colts player, and I know people hate it when they're like, put a name on it. Well, you have an understanding sometimes when somebody's saying something. You know, I talked to a Colts player yesterday that when I said, gosh, you know, and it wasn't a bad thing. We didn't say this as a negative, but I was like, can you believe it's been like 5 years since he played? And we both looked at each other, and then the jinx, you owe me a Coke, we both said, man, time flies. But I got news for you. 5 years to your body between the ages of 39 or 40 and 44 is a ton different than the 5 years of your body between 23 and 28. I mean, when those gears start slowing down, that rust kicks in. I'm telling you. Now, Phillip Rivers, I'm sure, is working out and doing things. He's coaching football. He's active. I get it. But that's a tall task for even somebody who is a borderline Hall of Famer to expect him to go out. Do I need to tell anybody about Kerry Collins? You remember that? Peyton Manning's got the neck issue. You know what? Carry on. Calm down and carry on. Kerry. We got Kerry Collins, the guy from Tennessee, the guy from New Orleans, the guy from Carolina. He's going to come in here. Kerry Collins, big body, big arm, former top 10 pick, knows how to play the game. That dude went out there, threw 2 passes, counted every lights that were up there in the ceiling above him, and then went back to Tennessee and for $5 million or whatever it was the Colts paid him, counted his money while strumming his guitar and putting in a dip because he couldn't play. And he was a fabulous player and seemingly a really good guy, Kerry Collins. But he hadn't played in a while, and I'm telling you, that rust is tough to knock off. I hope Phillip Rivers comes in, and I hope Phillip Rivers shocks the world. I hope he stuns everybody. But to me, it feels like a Hail Mary. And I try to be optimistic, and I try to be supportive, and I get it. I get why they would throw the Hail Mary, but I just cannot, in good faith, come on here to the listeners of this show and sit here and tell you folks and look you in the eye right here on this camera, if you're watching on the YouTube channel. I cannot look you right in the eyes on that camera and say that this feels to me anything other than a Hail Mary move of we have no other option. Not necessarily their fault. Not necessarily their fault, but they have no other option. Now, it also illuminates, without a doubt, what we knew or assumed to be true a couple of years ago when all of a sudden in the biggest overcorrect of all time, it was, guess what? You're driving down Meridian Street and then the breaking news sounder comes on and the next thing you know is breaking news out of Indianapolis. Matt Ryan is now the third string quarterback and Sam Ehlinger will be the quarterback for the rest of the year. What? And you wondered, did the general manager make this move? Clearly not. You know how we know clearly not now? Because we can retroactively put the pieces together and say, if Chris Ballard was really under belief that Sam Ehlinger deserved a shot to be the starting quarterback, then it seems like that would have been a very easy phone call for him to make right now and bring him right back and put him in the mix. But instead, we're calling up guys from ARP. Come on down. It's where we are. I get it. I do get it. But it doesn't mean that I think that it's going to be or work out for the reasons that you would normally be sold. I think it's because Chris Ballard in particular, and yes, he owes it to his franchise, his owner, his fan base, etc., to get into the playoffs if it's within reach. I get it. But I don't know that they make that move if they have a quarterback in the mix that they believe that they can grow into somebody to see what's there. But here we are. Stephen Holder going to join me 2:30 today. We will go over exactly this. Pacers did play last night, and I thought actually, you know what? First off, speaking of, and this is what the Pacers got to hope for, maybe they were enticed. Maybe they were drawn in. Maybe they were bought hook, line, and sinker into the narrative or the thought that a guy that seemingly is at the very end of his career still has something left within them because they watched Russell Westbrook go for a triple-double. Russell Westbrook hitting everything, rebounding all over the place, hitting the triple-double. And like Russell Westbrook's another one. I got to be honest with you. I get to the game last night, and the first thing I thought was, okay, so I know Sabonis is out. But now, and oh, that's right, Murray is still here. And then you have that combination of 2025 guys like Zach LaVine and DeMar DeRozan, and they kind of seem like the same guy to me. And then I'm like, oh, wait a minute, I forgot. Guess what? Russell Westbrook. Ta-da! Surprise, there's Russell Westbrook playing for the Sacramento Kings. Okay, cool. Yeah, I'll probably come out and play 12 minutes. Triple-double. You get lightning in a bottle sometimes when you're an old man. I know that. Right? Does Phillip Rivers have it? We'll see. Now, as for the injury to Daniel Jones, the timeline on the injury of Daniel Jones, the timeline on the injury of Anthony Richardson, and the concern of a compound of not one, not two, but 3 concussion protocols for a player, as we see in Mooney Ward. With those things, Ralph Reef, who joins us to talk about injuries and always gives excellent perspective, is going to do exactly that. He will do so on the other side. Then Scott Agnes coming up 2 o'clock hour, Holder as well on a Tuesday edition, a turn back the clock. It's a turn back that we're living like it's 2000 with no mask. But Phillip Rivers might be back, and so will we in just a couple with Ralph Reef. In Mooresville. Jake, I set my alarm every weekday to hear your opening monologue at 12 noon, and you never fail to entertain me and make me laugh out loud at least once. Today was such a joy to hear. Way to go. Richard, I appreciate it, and you have no idea how much it makes us kindred spirits and brothers in the bond, not because you might be a fight out like me, but because of the fact that you set an alarm for noon. Now, I'm hoping what that means is because, like, you're working and you want to remind yourself. But if it is a wake-up alarm at noon, that is even all the better. Because I got news for you. Like, when I did the morning show, I'd go home, sleep, alarm at noon. I mean, noon is my 7 a.m., brother. So I love it, Richard. I appreciate it. Joining me now on the Java House Peel and Pour guest line. You hear him on this show, I would say nearly weekly, because there are always new injuries to talk about. He is the foremost expert when it comes to athletic training, Ralph Reif, ralphreif.com, REIFF.com. You should go to the website just to look at the different places in which Ralph has worked as an athletic trainer and the different places in which he's had an impact on that profession, because that alone is impressive. But he joins us now in the program. And, Ralph, I want to begin with this. I appreciate the time. Before we get into the Daniel Jones injury, Riley Leonard, who is a player that trained going into the draft with Phillip Rivers, amongst other quarterbacks who have done so. But Riley Leonard, after his game in Jacksonville with the Colts, now we know has a grade 1 PCL sprain. I have no idea what that means. So that means roughly what, and like how severe is something like that?
Yeah, well, good afternoon, Jake and Riley Leonard. So PCL is the posterior cruciate ligament of the knee. There are 4 substantial ligaments in the knee. The anterior cruciate ligament, ACL, we know. So the brother of that is the PCL. And it does very little work compared to what the ACL does.
So that's the me ligament. The Jake Query knee ligament is the PCL ligament, right?
Yeah. So Jake, you're pretty much not needed a lot of the time.
Okay.
And until such time that basically the knee might get hyperextended, and so the big leg or the big bone on the bottom of the leg, the tibia, slides backwards a little bit, and in the knee joint, and it sprains or stretches that PCL. And that lines up with his, what I read, he finished the game, he got on the plane, he went home, walked into the complex Monday morning and said, hey, my knee hurts. And so, quite honestly, that's really good news that he's got a grade 1 sprain of the posterior cruciate ligament that can be managed. There's a lot of good ways to manage that in a short period of time.
Okay, and so let me ask you this, Ralph. When the average weekend warrior, and maybe there's no definitive answer on this, I realize every situation's different, but for the average person that just goes out and plays some pickup ball with some buddies, or does some pickleball, whatever it might be, and they simply get home and like, man, my knee was just last night. I got to be honest, my knee was kind of sore. Is that typically, would the PCL be the most likely of the injuries that the average person would see? No, it's not, Jake. The PCL it's not high on the list of ligament injuries in the knee. The MCL, the medial collateral ligament, is the most commonly injured ligament of the knee. That's where your knee sort of buckles in to the inside. So there's a lot of things that support the back side of the knee. The hamstring tendons come down and cross across the back of the joint, and the calf muscles come up and attach above the knee joint. So there's a lot of bracing back there naturally. So the PCL has a lot of protection. So I assume he got, it's the NFL, right? So any hit is a big hit. And so something occurred that jammed him either in the lower leg or up in the quad, the thigh area, that forced that knee into a pretty excessive hyperextension. By the way, for the MCL, I loved their baked tilapia. Their baked tilapia is fabulous. The cinnamon rolls at the end of the day at MCL are also fantastic, Ralph, for what it's worth.
They had some fish. What was it? Almadine, the fish? fish almondine, I think, was really good.
Fantastic, right? I mean, no question. Ralph Reef is my guest, Java House Peel and Port Guest Line. Okay, Ralph, so the Riley Leonard, I know that one thing that I've learned in the discussions that we've had is that when there are ligament injuries or stress to a ligament, you always, as a trainer, like to see 21 days from day of impact, for lack of a better phrase. Would that be the case with Riley Leonard with a grade 1 PCL strain? Is it still under that, look, he's going to need 3 weeks before we bring it back in and revisit it mode, or is that a shorter-term injury?
Well, they graded this as a grade 1, which is as mild as you can get on the grading scale. So they did that via imaging, MRI, etc. And so you shorten the clock. So because it's minor, you're going to need less time for that to feel better. And really, from this standpoint, Jake, you're right, and I appreciate you being a good student of the biology of these things. And but we're going to shorten that time frame for the PCL. Again, the hamstring, all that musculature on the backside of the knee helps protect it, and it can sit there and sort of bathe in its own inflammation, and it'll heal pretty well with that. But again, tight clock, and that PCL is going to heal up quicker than the 21-day clock that I usually put on them. Okay,
let's get to the injury to Daniel Jones. And again, Ralph Reef is my guest, and I want to be clear, out of respect to Ralph, these are not situations where you are the trainer on record for them. So we're speaking in generalities here as opposed to this, a specific nature on, say, a Daniel Jones. But when we know that Daniel Jones had the torn Achilles and it was in a leg opposite of where we had previously talked about the fibula fracture, is it possible or even probable that tear came from a compensation of the way he was moving because of the pain from the other side?
Your intelligence just starts today. So, yes, that is very much a compensation issue. The first thought I had, I happened to be up in Green Bay, and folks up there came out and said, "Hey, Daniel Jones, I think he just tore his Achilles." And I was like, "Which leg is it?" And they said it was his right leg. And I said, he's been limping. He's been putting all his weight on that right leg ever since the injury to the fibula. And so predictable? No. But then once it happens, you say, man, a high percentage of the rationale of why has to go to the fact that he was basically doing one-legged hops for this entire injury period. We mentioned last week talking about how painful that interosseous membrane is between the fibula and the tibia, and I watched him on television with some of his warm-up stuff and that they had on, and I could just see, hips lifted a little higher on that left side. He was really putting a lot of pressure on the right leg, and didn't anticipate it, but I'm not shocked that compensation caused that incident to occur.
That sort of an injury, okay, and we're going to speak again in generalities here, but a high-level athlete that is 28 years old and has the fibula issue on the left side and now the Achilles on the right. The Achilles is going to be the longer-term injury. If we are in December right now, a realistic time frame as to when Daniel Jones will have complete range of movement and basically unimpeded movement getting back onto the field would be what month?
Well, don't compare it to Tyrese because of the difference in sports.
Right.
Okay. And so I would anticipate that between now and camps in May, that's 6 months from now, he could very much be flat-footed, no boot, no restriction of flat-footed movement, sort of getting up on his toes and throwing the football. So I would anticipate seeing that as well, that, come May, I think people will be very excited and say, boy, he looks great. But there will be an additional probably 4 months of time. So now we're into 10 months, which puts us into what, October?
Yep.
To where sitting here in the cold of December and trying to forecast this, I would say 10 months from now, you would have a very normal looking quarterback with both legs available.
So would he be able to go the full rigor of workout, say, in August and September, you're saying, Ralph, and then October is when he looks good, or October is when he can then finally begin to ramp that up?
Yeah, in generalities now, Jake, in generalities, I would see that he would be be able to jog, be able to be in controlled settings. So, he might mirror a coach or an athletic trainer that sort of mirrors tells him to move left, move right, move backwards, forwards, backpedal, so forth, in controlled environment where you can ask questions after each movement. How do you feel? What's that look like? What's your heart rate at? And so, yeah, he'll have a lot of good controlled activity throughout the summer months.
Ralph, before I let you go, I wanted to ask you this. I had somebody that told me once they were in the Air Force, and their job in the Air Force is they were a mechanic on the Air Force, in the Air Force, and they worked on some of the carriers out in the, at sea. And he said, man, I'll tell you what, he goes, there was always such a cool thing when the pilots would take off after we had done a routine maintenance on the plane. They would kind of dip the wings as they took off, kind of as a salute and a tip of the cap to the guys that had worked on the planes. And he goes, it was always such a gratifying feeling. And it was so cool, and it made my work worth it. Do you as a trainer feel that when you see an athlete, and I know that as a trainer, you get to know individuals, but at the same time, you still have a job to do, right? Which is just to treat, to determine what's going on, and then to advise on how to get a player healthy again. Do you get that feeling of a gratifying feeling when you see an athlete going out and running back out on the field for the first time?
You captured it very well, Jake, and I'm almost emotional as you talk about that, because I can recall so many times where you assist an athlete as an athletic trainer, and you've got them at their most vulnerable time when they're, initially injured, and you work with them through the time going back, and they're the ones who confide in you. They cry on your shoulder. They cuss at you. There's all of that process. But yeah, when they get back to their craft at full go, there's an unbelievable amount of pride and so forth. I'll give you a true story from this weekend. I was in Green Bay with the Packers. Dr. Chris Carr, sports psychologist. He's worked with multiple organizations around the world. He's been with the Packers the last 6 years full time. And their quarterback, Jordan Love, made a comment in the media this week that he says, the game goes well when I get in the flow. And that comes exactly from Dr. Chris Carr, sitting with him and teaching him about mental toolkits and how to manage the game. And so I was with Chris, and he shared that comment with me and replayed the tape, and Chris's eyes watered up. I mean, yeah, we get pretty tied up in these athletes and what they do. If it's a driver getting behind a car, if it's a pit crew member, if it's somebody coming back from any kind of injury or mental health situation, it's very, very gratifying. That's what fires the engine each day.
Reif.com, REIFF, RalphReif.com, Executive Performance Solutions, and you can read all about his incredible journey as a trainer and the different work that he has done and continues to do, which includes the biggest task of all, and that is occasionally saying that I'm intelligent on this radio program, which is very much appreciated, even if only for a fleeting moment, and even if it's only over the agreement of the fabulous food at MCL. Ralph, appreciate the time as always, and certainly look forward to talking to you again.
Okay, have a great day, Jake.
I appreciate it. Ralph Reif joining me on the program on the Java House Peel and Pour guest line. All right, we come back. Sometimes there are situations where you can compound an injury to make it even worse. I'm simply talking about from a PR standpoint. I'll let you know what I'm talking about next. This is, and I thought this was cool, actually. and to not to get too into the weeds from a legal standpoint, I don't want to put anything in jeopardy here, but this is pretty cool. So, and Kurt Gerald's is doing a fabulous job pulling all of the Rivers music, right? You've already got, you got 25 songs queued up, right?
We're ready to go the rest of the show. I'm ready to go.
Okay, so here's the thing. If you're wondering where Eddie is today, there was a situation. I don't want to, get too into like legal mumbo jumbo here, but I think everyone knows by now that I did trademark the phrase "Why not Indiana?" I really did trademark it, and it was not an easy thing to do. It was kind of a long, and yes, I had to pay. Not a ton, but a long process. And I'm not saying the name, and I truly do enjoy the store. I have, but nonetheless, with it trademarked, it was brought to my attention that there's a place that is making money off of my phrase that I trademarked. And so, and it's, I do have partnerships with the shop, for example. Like that's why you don't hear me like promoting that. There's a conflict of interest there, perhaps, but I have a partnership with them. Somebody else was selling the shirt that is in violation, so I had to get on top of that, and that's where that is. In that process, when dealing with merchandising, it came to my attention, and this is very cool. There is and it's not, I'm trying to think of what the one is. It's not New Era. And I can't remember which one it is, but one of the merchandising folk with which I work, they let me know that there is a hat manufacturer of Major League Baseball hats, okay? And they are currently undergoing a contest for models of what they call the big cranium. Because, we live in a world where most people are a 7 1/4, 7 3/8. Eddie is like an 8 5/8 size head. And so I said to Eddie, I go, you should see if you can get like in on this royalties gig as part of their big cranium. And so they literally called and said, well, we're doing tryouts for headshots. Okay. And wide angle lens, obviously. But this is up in LaPorte. So Eddie, the company here, and I appreciate it, gave him the day off to drive up to LaPorte as part of the photo shoot, kind of like George Costanza when he became a hand model. Eddie is apparently in the running now for the big cranium, and he would be the big cranium, and they're going to use his head in imaging and other such things because there's been kind of an outcry. I don't know if it's called like the Big Head Association or something like that, but there's this group of people that feel like their big, abnormally large heads are not getting focused enough in hat advertisements. So Eddie is in the running to become the big cranium. And so he needed the day off to go up to LaPorte for this photo shoot and to see if he could turn that and parlay that into a deal. So he called you this morning at 9? He was on his way up, right?
Yeah, it was like 8:45. He didn't say much. He said, I'm going to LaPorte on behalf of the BHA, and I didn't know what that means.
Yeah, that's the Big Head Association.
Big Head Association.
Yeah, that's what that
Makes
is.
sense now.
Yeah, so anyway, we wish Eddie the best of luck. We hope that he's back tomorrow and that we can find out whether or not maybe I'll get a cut out of that. I don't know. Okay. Notre Dame, I understand it. I do get their frustration. And I do get I'm totally, and I think people misunderstand here that I'm sitting here saying that Notre Dame should not have gotten into the college football playoff. I have said, and even the biggest Notre Dame fan out there that thinks that I'm some Notre Dame hater will have to admit, I have said all season long since like week 3 that if they were to continue to win, which they've done, that I think they're one of the 8 best teams in college football. Not 12, 8. I think they're one of the 8 best teams. But it comes down to the best resumes. And I think yesterday Notre Dame might have doubled down and might have done it in air. I will explain what I'm talking about, and we have tickets to give away for Motley Crue, right? How many sets do we have to give away for Motley Crue? One set of tickets to give away for Motley Crue. And we're going to do it in kind of a unique fashion as well. I'll explain all of it. We'll do it on the other side here. It's Query & Company. You're listening to it, 93.5, 107.5 The Fan. Day. 44-year-old Phillip Rivers is signing to the quarterback-needy Indianapolis Colts on the practice squad. Keep in mind, on the practice squad, meaning that he can still be activated for the quarterbacking situation on Sunday. Now, a couple of angles and ways of which to look at this, okay? Phillip Rivers, and I'm going to go back to what I said off the top of the show and rehash this, okay? The Colts, it's not at the – there are certain times when you look at a team that is in disarray and you can say it's at the fault of the team. It's at the fault of the general manager. It's at the fault of the coach. It's at the fault of the owner. We have seen all three of those situations repeatedly over different variables within this franchise, historically speaking. You could certainly make the argument that in the early years when players were getting released after the game and re-signed on Wednesday by the owner, Bob Irsay, and Bob Irsay was calling down plays from the press box, ownership disarray. You could obviously then point towards multiple times where, from a general manager standpoint, they made the wrong decision or they got too aggressive in the wrong ways, and that led to uncertainty. With any franchise, it goes without saying that head coaches, sometimes you have great coaches, sometimes you got bad coaches. Like any franchise, you have examples of each of those, historically speaking, within the Indianapolis Colts. That would be true of any franchise. This particular situation, there's a little bit of both, and let me explain. It is my belief that the Colts are in a situation right now that is literally like shoe carnival. I mean, there's just, you go in and there's stuff just flying all over the place here of ways that you can look at this. You got Mooney Ward, who now is in concussion protocol for the third time this season, and you worry about that from an individual standpoint. You have Sauce Gardner that you traded not one but 2 first-round picks for, and he is now hurt. And while he was at the Pacer game last night, and they did not put him on IR, so I don't think his mobility is not that compromised. I think he's going to be back, and he is clearly an elite level player. You have the situation now, though, is this. The Colts at the beginning of the year, I'm not going to tell you anything you don't probably already know, but just to revisit it, they had Anthony Richardson, who they had drafted as with hope and expectation of that being your franchise quarterback. A unique player, a unicorn, an athlete, totally tantalizing in all of the areas that you wanted to see except for the level of experience. The thing holding him back, it wasn't his arm, it wasn't his size, it wasn't his strength, it wasn't his speed, it was simply his experience and lack thereof. And also, if you were to ask the Colts, they basically said, all the things that take place inside the building, all the behind-the-scenes things, okay, is what they were missing from Anthony Richardson, what they wanted to see from Anthony Richardson. So they go out and they sign Daniel Jones almost in hopes of just creating an atmosphere of competition and also legitimacy of the room for Anthony Richardson. Let's go out and get a quarterback that is going to push our young guy a little bit so that things like doing the helmet tap and taking himself out of the game. I've always said when you do sports talk radio, for example, the thing that drives you to a great extent is not just the desire to every day do a great show, but also to know that there are a lot of people that would love the opportunity as well. And so you want to continue to do it, so there's no reason to have to put somebody else in there, right? You're always looking over your back a little bit in terms of that competition. And I think for Anthony Richardson, when they handed him the keys too early, he never had that person behind him that was pushing him a little bit. So they bring in Daniel Jones under the thought of, let's do this to guide Anthony Richardson, and then maybe we'll kind of get the positive byproduct of the fact that, oh, yeah, turns out this guy can play. And that's what happened. So now you had the best of both worlds. You had Daniel Jones, who was in here and had this symbiotic relationship with Shane Steichen and was able to execute flawlessly what it was the Colts needed. And he wasn't turning the ball over like it plagued him in New York, and he was able to run when he needed to run, which at times he didn't do in New York because their line was porous, etc. And they got out to a 7-1 start, and everything was literally gumdrops and lollipops. Literally, gumdrops and lollipops. You drove on West 56th Street, and before you even got to Eagle Creek, there was like this hue in the air, and you're like, what's that? And they're like, oh, that's the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow that's the Colts complex, because everything was rose. Everything was perfect. And they're 7-1. And then Anthony Richardson has the freak injury. And you feel terrible for him. Not Richardson's fault, not the Colts' fault. Freak injury. Freak accident. Certain guys you can look at and say, man, for whatever reason, it's like drama just surrounds them. Maybe. But nonetheless, that's the circumstance, fault of no one. Daniel Jones suddenly has this fracture in his fibula, wants to play through it, tries to play through it, slides a little bit in terms of his level of play, but not Daniel Jones' fault and not the Colts' fault. Certain players have this like aura of injury that surrounds them, but for whatever reason, they play through it, whatever, and then the Achilles happens, not his fault. Not the Colts' fault. So you turn to Riley Leonard. Riley Leonard, young guy, going into the draft, seeked the consultation of a former quarterback that tutors and preps young players for the draft. That guy, Phillip Rivers. And so Riley Leonard has a relationship with him there. Riley Leonard goes out, plays, has the grade 1 PCL sprain after the Jacksonville game, which realistically, I didn't think he looked terrible. He is more of a mobile quarterback than a throwing quarterback, and he has limitation through the air, but they believe enough in him that he was on the roster, and they didn't feel the need to go out over the course of the last 10 weeks and bring somebody else in to become your backup or emergency quarterback. And he goes in and plays and then gets hurt, and now here we are. So, what takes us to the fact that here in the 1 o'clock hour, when I was supposed to be talking about Riley Leonard's former team, Notre Dame, that we're talking again about Phillip Rivers? Because Phillip Rivers is now signed to the practice squad of the Indianapolis Colts. So what got us here? What got us here is you go back 5 years ago. You go back 5 years ago to where Chris Ballard, as the general manager of the Colts, was once again trying to basically put together the world's largest Band-Aid at the quarterback spot. And they tried a couple of different things. And yes, not the Colts' fault. Andrew Luck retired at the 11th hour, not the fault of Chris Ballard. Fine. But he's going out, and instead of drafting a young quarterback or getting drafting a Justin Herbert or whoever else you might have thought could have been a player for them, they go out and they're band-aiding each year with a veteran quarterback. And in 2020, which was the most bizarre year in sport, it was Phillip Rivers. Now, we didn't know Phillip Rivers well. We still don't know him well because of the fact that when he was here as a Colt, and he played well, had a good year. And I think Chris Ballard and Frank Reich, the head coach at the time, thought to themselves, you know what? It'd be great if we can get 2 years out of this guy because we went to the playoffs, we went to Buffalo, we got beat, but we really played well, and it was a weird year. He didn't get to have like the total interaction with the media and the fan base and represent the franchise because it's all Zoom calls and masks and COVID and all that. It was weird. Everything was weird. Not at the fault of anybody. Circumstantial. But it was weird. And so the Colts, I think, really thought to themselves, if we can get a second year out of Phillip Rivers, that will be huge because we can continue to try to figure out what we want to do at quarterback, but this guy still has some gas left in the tank. And as they tried to talk to him about it, and Phillip Rivers, it was clear, was just kind of at the end of his road. Maybe they could have called his former quarterback coach in San Diego / Los Angeles. Maybe they could have called a guy that Phillip Rivers had a really good walk-in step relationship.
Let me think it over, will you, Charlie? I got a guy on the other line about some white walls. I'll talk to you later.
Rick, we heard.
Tire World.
Oh, Lou. This is Charlie Donovan with the Cleveland Indians. How would you like to manage the Indians this year?
I don't know.
What do you mean you don't know? This is a chance to manage in the big leagues.
Let me think it over, will you, Charlie? I got a guy on the other line about some white walls. I'll talk to you later.
To think of a guy coming back after that, after having a surgery on a bone in his eye, and have to play a full contact sport, one would think that it takes more time than that. But you have Daniel Jones, who now has had surgery. He's theoretically going to be out of commission. Anthony Richardson is a guy that you have on contract for next year. You don't know if Daniel Jones can play next year. You also don't know if he's even going to be under contract here next year. And you have Riley Leonard that maybe you saw enough in to say, there might be something here that this is a guy that can eventually become a reliable, long-term Jim Sorgi-type backup quarterback for whoever our quarterback is. But we don't have Daniel Jones here to tutor and mentor Anthony Richardson anymore. I don't mean that we don't have him. He's not going through practices with him. We don't have anybody as a veteran to mentor Riley Leonard and work with him and take advantage of the few things that we saw that we kind of liked. But guess what? We have a guy that has an existing relationship with Riley Leonard and a guy that perhaps at the very least can simply give and lead by example on what it takes, like Daniel Jones' role was for Anthony Richardson, who we have on contract for next year. And Anthony Richardson. And maybe now we realize Anthony Richardson we're going to have to hand the ball to for next year. So who can we bring in that is going to mentor and serve these roles, these dual roles, and also, if need be, play some quarterback for us? That's scenario one and reason one why literally Phillip Rivers just left some high school that he was working at. He probably was walking through the hallway in some bike shorts, and they came down with a pink pass, and they're like, excuse me, Mr. Rivers, you have a phone call in the office. And he walks down there, and he picks it up, hello? Now, can you imagine that conversation? Well, dadgummit, I can't believe you're calling me. Look, Phillip, and I can't even do a Chris Ballard, but, that's scenario one, that those are the reasons Phillip Rivers is here. It is my belief that the reason actually is this. It is my belief that, as I played up the top of the show, the Doug Flutie Hail Mary. Do we have the audio of the two plays, Kurt? I led the show with these two plays because they're the two that most were dancing through my head like the gumdrops and lollipops that have been dancing around on West 56th Street to the first 8 games of the year. And now we're in the spot where I'm laying awake at night at 3:48 in the morning, and I'm staring at the ceiling, and I'm seeing and hearing this going through my head all night.
Flutie flushed. Throws it down. Caught by Boston College. I don't believe it. Oh. It's a touchdown. The Eagles win it.
Stewart with time. Lets it go. He's got 3 people down there. The ball's up in the air. Caught. Touchdown. Caught by Westbrook for a touchdown. They call it in some circles the Hail Mary.
That is indeed, Keith Jackson, what they call it. And that was the call when Cordell Stewart threw the Hail Mary to Michael Westbrook when Colorado went into the Big House and beat Michigan in 94. And before that, 10 years prior to that, Doug Flutie to Gerard Phelan, the two most famous Hail Marys I can remember of my time watching football. And this feels to me, realistically, like a Hail Mary. Yes, I just laid out the business aspect of it, the foresight aspect of it, the kumbaya aspect of why Phillip Rivers is back in Indianapolis. But I actually believe the more logical conclusion to draw here, and I understand it, is that this is a Hail Mary. It's a Hail Mary for a franchise that has lost 4 of 5 games and 3 straight, but still with that, because of, to their credit and kudos to them, because of the position they put themselves in through 8 games, they are still within striking distance. They are still within a Hail Mary of the playoffs. They're sitting right there looking at the clock at their own 45 with 4 seconds left, and they know they still got a chance. There's a puncher's chance, right? When Julian Sayin got that ball with 1 play left for Ohio State on Saturday night at Lucas Oil Stadium, you looked at it and you went, they ain't going to score here. They're too far back. He can't throw it into the end zone from here. Yeah, they got locked down receiver. They got unbelievable receivers, but for whatever reason, Ryan Day forgot that they're on the field. But nonetheless, they're not going to score here. But when you're at the 45, you're like, I don't know, man. If you can get it down there, Cordell Stewart throws it 62 yards in the air, you got a chance. That's where they are. And I believe that what we are seeing here is a general manager, not necessarily the coach, although one would think they're attached at the hip, but a general manager that knew going into this year that this was a massive year. And I have no idea. And truth be told, I don't know that anybody has any idea the working relationship between Chris Ballard and Carly Ursay-Gordon. I don't know that. It would be disingenuous for me and probably irresponsible of me to even speculate on what that is, other than to say, by all account, externally, seems good. Seems good. We have no reason to believe anything other than they have totally fair and competent and aware ownership. I have no reason to believe otherwise. But only those two people truly know going into the year what the expectation was of what it would take for Chris Ballard to be retained as the general manager of the Indianapolis Colts. And is it possible that he, even if it wasn't outwardly said to him, believes the possibility that his job would be in serious jeopardy if, in fact, they don't make the playoffs? And so, instead of looking at it and saying, okay, so Riley Leonard is hurt, Sam Ehlinger is a guy that is on a practice squad that we could easily get, that knows the system. And at one time, apparently, there was enough promise seen in him that the owner of the Colts at the time said, this is our guy moving forward, and Matt Ryan, third stringer. But instead of going that route, they go back to the familiarity of Phillip Rivers. Now, does anybody really think that Phillip Rivers gets them to the Super Bowl? He might get them to the playoffs, but does anybody really think that Phillip Rivers gets you to the Super Bowl? Because in my opinion, the only reason that you sign Phillip Rivers at the age of 44 is one of 3 things. Either because, number one, you need now the mentor role to come in and just be a steadying force in your quarterback locker room. Possible, not probable, possible that's the reason. But does Phillip Rivers do that? Like I said, Phillip Rivers, if you called Phillip Rivers to say, hey, we could use a player coach. I know you're coaching high school football, but you want to come and actually do some babysitting for an NFL franchise in a quarterback room with young guys? That is like Lou Brown in Major League. Well, I got a guy on the other line about some white walls. Right? So I don't think it's that. Is it because they realistically think he can get them to the Super Bowl and win a Super Bowl? I don't think it's that. I think Phillip Rivers is here because the Colts brass, meaning Chris Ballard and Shane Steichen, look at the remaining schedule. Seattle, San Francisco, Jacksonville, Houston. And they look at it and they go, we need 2 wins. Can we get 2 wins out of these 4? Can we get 2 wins out of these 4? And so they look at it and they say, okay, Jacksonville at home. Houston is at Houston, which is tough, but maybe, just maybe, Houston at that point will have had, they'll be in a seed where there's nowhere for them to go, and now that game all of a sudden is within reach. We need 2 wins. And this, to me, jumps out like a Hail Mary. It does. It feels like a Hail Mary of we're at the 45-yard line, It looked like a certainty that we were at the very least going to be in field goal range, but we need 5 points. We moved the ball really well to this point, and we just had 2 quarterback sacks and a run stuffed up the middle, and the clock's running, and we got 45 seconds left, and we got to throw a Hail Mary on our year. That's what it feels like. And I don't damn them for it. I don't blame them for it. I understand it. But I just will go back to this point. And I'm not saying it's the right one. I'm not saying it's even a founded one. It's simply a gut feeling. And believe you me, at 53, the gut feeling is bigger than it was at 25. Okay? It is my gut feeling that this move only happens. It only happens if it's a franchise that knows that they've got to do something at the very end here. If they legitimately thought that Riley Leonard, for example, was a guy that they could build around for the future, and I know he's dinged up. The only reason you go and get Phillip Rivers is if you are throwing a desperation here because you realistically feel that you can get into the postseason and that benchmark is what you need to get to. That's the goal. If we can just get to that point, then we'll see what happens. Because if there was, in my opinion, if there was confidence in the leadership and the stability of the leadership moving forward, then you would be able to say, look, we had a really good year and a really good team, and I know that we owe it to our fans and everybody else to put our best foot forward, but realistically speaking, we're going to go out and sign, say, Ellinger for a game off the practice squad until Riley Leonard is ready to go again, and then he's a young quarterback that we saw a flash in, and we'll see what we have from there and let the year pan out, and then next year we'll re-sign Daniel Jones for a year or tag him and bring him back with Anthony Richardson and try it all over again because we're really happy with the foundation that we had. Because there's no reason to believe they shouldn't be anything other than happy with when this group was healthy and this group was all together. There were some pieces there, and they made the move for Sauce Gardner, clearly believing that they were all in. So if Sauce Gardner, if you make that move because you don't have any quarterback in the future because you sent away your 2 first-round picks. So the only way you make this move is if you knew there was some sort of a benchmark you were that close to, and that alone then buys you another year. Because if you felt totally confident and comfortable that you were back next year, then you would say, you know what, let's ride this out, let's do what we can, and we'll bring everybody back healthy next year and see where the chips fall. This, to me, is a Hail Mary. And I think league-wide it's seen as a Hail Mary. And it may work. It may work. It may. But if it does, it'll be talked about in the form of the Doug Flutie pass because, yes, that worked to Gerard Phelan. But 9 times out of 10, that ball is like Aaron Bailey in Pittsburgh, and it bounces and hits the ground. But I want to know your folks' thoughts on it. Scott Agnes in 30, an hour from now, Holder. We're going to table the Notre Dame talk for this because it's big. Phillip Rivers is now back once again as an Indianapolis Colt, at least for now in the practice squad. 239-1070. You love it, you are skeptical of it, or you're in mockery of it. 239-1070, the telephone number for you to sound off Phillip Rivers back with Indianapolis. Number one, Phillip Rivers for right now is on the practice squad. He is a 2026 NFL Hall of Fame semifinalist, I believe is where it stands right now. But Hall of Fame eligibility is, of course, dictated upon, I believe it's 5 years removed from the paperwork official for retirement. If Phillip Rivers is to play a game or sign to the active roster of the Indianapolis Colts, then that clock resets. And it would be 2031, the class before he is eligible again, assuming this is the only year that he plays. That is house cleaning item number one, because several people have asked. Number two, maybe it just so happens that Phillip Rivers is like, you know what? I'm swept up and captivated in the best story in college football. And my coach, my quarterback coach back from my days as a Wolfpack member of North Carolina State, is now in Bloomington, Indiana, and I want to go hang out with Curt Cignetti. Maybe that's it. Maybe it's that he said, you know what? I have a mentor-type relationship, big brother, little brother, with Riley Leonard, among other quarterbacks like Drake May that I have tutored and worked with heading into the draft. And I want to go help him further in his time in Indianapolis. That's possible. It's possible that Chris Ballard looked at it and said, you know what? Daniel Jones was a really good, consistent veteran driving force for us, and now he has bigger things to worry about, like his surgery. And so we need another veteran in here to mentor our young guys, both Riley Leonard and Anthony Richardson. And maybe it's simply that Chris Ballard and Shane Steichen are looking at it saying, we've got to try to salvage the season. We got to make the playoffs. We are close to it. We've got to salvage the season somehow. That's also possible. But I'd like to know what you folks think at 239-1070 and your overall thoughts on this. Phillip Rivers now back with the Colts. We will begin with John, who joins us on the show. Hi, John. How are you?
Hey, Jake. Overall feelings, first of all, this is objectively hilarious. Second of all, it's objectively awesome. Let me paint a picture for you. Sunday night, I'm devastated. I'm listening to the sad girl music that girls in high school listen to these days after a breakup.
You listening to The Cure, were you? You had The Cure on all night?
Well, I mean, you might not know Phoebe Bridgers, Gracie, Lizzie McAlpine. Like, I was just devastated thinking back to weeks 1 and 8 and how we were so back as a franchise. And then all of a sudden, poof, it's gone. And then hearing the Rivers rumors yesterday, and then now it's a reality. And all of a sudden, I'm back on the ship, sitting atop Uncle Phil's shoulders to ride us into these next 4 weeks. Who knows what the hell is going to happen, but at the very least, it's going to be cinema to watch. I mean, he's going up against this terrific defense in Seattle. It's probably going to rain in Seattle, even worse than it did in Jacksonville, and he's going to play. Riley's not ready. He's going to step in, and, second play of the game, he's going to go 40 yards to Pitt. I think he's the one who threw Pitt's first touchdown.
That is correct. He did.
So, anyways, it's just been an insane 48 hours. The real reason this happened, there are zero options out there. This is a guy who grew up in this offense to some degree because of Shane and the coaching tree that he was a part of. And who cares at this point? Everyone's talking about it and is shocked. And as Colts fans, this is what we expect at this point. What the hell, man? Let's enjoy it. Let's try to get in the playoffs.
John, I'm there for it. I hear you. Let's enjoy it. I like it. Tony.
Yes.
Do you find this to be great, or what's your thought?
I think it's a heck of an idea. I wonder if it was Ballard's idea. I think it's great. I think the best we've done since Luck left was when Rivers was here.
I know, but
and then when he left, I was
Tony, here's the only thing. I don't disagree with any of that, right?
Right.
Only thing there is it was 5 years ago. That's my only hesitation. And you know what? Like, I saw a Colts player last night, and I said, hey, man, how about Phillip Rivers coming back? And then I said, but it's been like 5 years, right? And we both looked at each other like, man, time flies. And I say that not in pessimism, but in reality, right? I mean, in the terms of the human body waiting 5 years before you come back, that's going to be – and I get it. I mean, Rivers is probably in a physical condition even at 44 than most people are at 29. I totally get that. Bruce.
Yes.
You're up, Bruce. What's up?
Well, whenever I'm watching this game last weekend, it goes from doom and gloom, right, to now all of a sudden you hear these reports yesterday that he's coming in for a workout. And, Phillip Rivers is my age, and I can only imagine what it'd be like for me coming back, but that's a different story. But, whenever you look at – I'm trying to make sense of this because I know Phillip was with Steichen in San Diego, right?
Correct. That's correct.
Okay. Yeah, so, Steichen has some trust in him, and he knows Shane's system. So that is a plus. And then the fact that he's worked with Riley the way he has, it makes you wonder if maybe they're going to be like, okay, give him a headset and say, talk to Riley, talk him through this, because you got to wonder how much that Riley's actually worked with. He hasn't worked with them ones at all until this week, and now he's hurt, so he's not even going to get the chance to do that. So, I don't have any doubt that Phillip could go out there and probably play when he's been working with his high school, team down here in Alabama or whatever for the last 5 years. If he's been running with those boys, he's probably still a little bit of shape. He can probably throw the ball. It's just not.
Bruce, I like, listen,
40 yards.
Bruce, I appreciate the call. I don't rule out what you said there, Bruce, of the possibility of, maybe this is about Riley Leonard and the tutorial thereof. That you cannot rule that out. That is entirely possible. Randy is up next. 239-1070. What's up, Randy?
Hey, well, I really don't care about the Colts. This Patriots Nation.
No, hold on, Randy. I'm going to bump you up a little bit here because I had problems hearing you. Randy, I need you to talk a little louder. Did you say you don't care about the Colts much? This is Patriots Nation. Is that what you said? Oh, Randy's gone. All right, who's next? Todd. What's up, Todd?
Hey, what's happening? Jake, are you there?
Todd, I'm here.
Hey,
this is what's happening, Todd, is it not?
You got it, man.
Todd, listen, hold on. We're going to start this all over again. That was the lamest what's happening of all time. You are Mr. Colts optimism typically. You're Mr. Energy, and you sounded totally deflated and defeated there following up Numbnuts Randy. So, Todd, I'm going to give you another opportunity. We're just going to reset here. We're going to take a 3-second pause. Line 5 is Todd. Todd, how are you?
Hey, what's happening, Jake? How are you?
That's more like it. All right, Todd, what do you think?
Okay, what I think you got to take your hat off to what I got to believe this is Chris Ballard, and you got to take your hat off to Chris Ballard and what Shane Steichen are trying to do. I thought you summed up like an analysis, call it, on what could potentially be the minds of our executives to try to make some sort of run. I think you're spot on about getting 2 out of the 4 of these games. And quite frankly, it seems like these quarterbacks are just superhumans in their 40s. And I'm all in on this Phillip Rivers thing. He played good for us. Let's take into consideration that he's kept himself in pretty good shape, that he's a good football mind, and that he can go right into West 56th Street and turn it right back up. Jake, I don't know about you, man, but I feel good about it. This season could not have went better, especially the first half. And then boom, just talk about the injury bug thrown at a team. I don't pay attention to a lot of other teams other than the Colts, but I can't imagine based off what
Todd,
we've done.
The Colts have 4 remaining games, Todd. What would their record be amongst those 4 games?
Well, let me say one more thing. We're not talking about the defense enough, Jake. Okay? And our defense, if we play our best game defensively, I don't think there's a way that anybody can stop us. If we can hold them to a low amount of points and we can put a couple touchdowns on the board, I don't see how we don't win every game, to answer your question.
Okay. All right, fair enough. So even with Mooney Ward out and Sauce Gardner still out and Buckner not yet back to full strength, then you're good with the defense, though, right?
I think the next man up mentality is still continued in the Colts locker room. And if there's any Colts defensive players listening right now, or any Indianapolis Colts listen, which I'm sure they are, Indianapolis is behind these guys.
Okay,
They're gonna
fair
get
enough.
loud as hell.
Fair enough. 36 against Jacksonville, but I hear you. Might have to shore up a few things there, Todd. All right, we'll continue with the phone calls. 239-1070 is the number. Scott Agnes, by the way, joining us 18 minutes from now. Is it savvy? Is it desperate? Is it strategic? Phillip Rivers is signed to the Colts practice squad, but one would assume that when you are 44 years old and you are a semifinalist for the Hall of Fame, 5 years removed from the last pass you threw in the NFL, which was for the Indianapolis Colts in a year where he did play well, do you come back? Do you sacrifice being around your kids for a couple of months to come back and be on a practice squad, pick up your check for a couple grand each week, sit in film rooms to tutor Riley Leonard, Anthony Richardson, or are you coming back because, dadgummit, you're going to get out on the field and wing the ball around and try to lift this team into the playoffs? And if you are the front office of the Colts, are you signing said quarterback because you believe that he is a solid citizen that is needed in your locker room, or are you doing it because, dadgummit, you need to get in the playoffs if you want to be back next year? Those are the questions. With those of the answers, we go to the phone lines. JD joining us now.
Hey, guys. How we doing?
JD, you got a great voice. Have I told you that before?
I think you may have said that when I called in about Dan Weldon.
Yeah, you got a great voice.
Appreciate it. My whole thing is Phil Rivers was solid when he was with the Colts, and I've always been a fan of his. I thought he did us real good when he was here the last time, and I was kind of surprised that the Colts didn't give him an extended contract when he retired. I think he is somebody who can come in and do what needs to be done if just getting in the playoffs is what the goal is. He can probably do that for us.
Now,
I was talking. Go ahead.
Well, let me cut you off there to ask you this question, JD, because I think you make a very interesting point. Number one, I think the Colts would have loved to have signed him to a second year last go round, but they couldn't convince him to do it. Okay, but number two, when you mentioned that, and I think you made a very interesting point here, JD. So stick with me. When you said, I think he can get them to the playoffs if that is the goal. Do you believe that if he gets them into the playoffs, that the Colts are a viable Super Bowl contender?
No.
Okay.
I don't.
And I agree with you. So that raises then the question of if in fact getting to the playoffs is the end goal here, why would that be? Unless you have a front office that believes that that is what is necessary for them to pass go, collect $200, and get to go into next year.
I believe this incentive base that the front office needed to get this team to the playoffs by hook or crook. We are in a desperate situation, desperate times to bring forth desperate measures. So if we get to the playoffs, which is pretty much just making it probably through the first round, and that's it, hey, they achieved what they wanted to do, which is more than what it was looking like as of last week. So I think that's what the ultimate goal is. Let's just get to the playoffs, and we'll work on what we're going to do next year. I've never seen anything look so bleak. This city was up on high horses at the beginning of the season, because I'll be honest with you, prior to this season, I was talking to my buddy Coach, and I kept saying, I say the Colts can win 8 games. And we've achieved that. But now we have had bad luck spring up on us, and now it's just basically trying to save face.
Look,
and I think this whole thing is trying to help the fans get over what is a miserable situation that really no one had control over. That's what I'm kind of
I would tend to agree. Look, and I appreciate the call, JD. I agree that there are circumstances that have come their way that are beyond their control. But the desperation at quarterback situation is within their control, because it was they who sent, and I know I keep banging on this, but not one but 2 first-round picks. 2 of them. So you keep forgetting that. You say to yourself, like, well, the quarterback situation is kind of bleak right now, and who knows what happens with Jones, but, they'll have to draft a quarterback or reset that table. You talk about Phillip Rivers, if he plays in the game will reset his Hall of Fame eligibility back 5 years. And realistically speaking, this potential at quarterback sets them back 5 years, depending on what happens here, right? But there's no sense in the other thing that you have to keep in mind. Once you thought, if they thought the year had gotten away from them, there's kind of no point in just writing that out to see where you fall draft-wise because you got no first-round pick. Mike.
Jake.
What's up,
Jake,
Mike?
I'm going to suggest a blockbuster trade.
Okay, all right. Now, Mike, now just so you know, I'm going to, and I appreciate the suggestion of blockbuster trades, right? But we know sometimes blockbuster trades are fantasy and not reality, okay? So are you admitting that this is fantasy versus reality, or do you think this is realistically one that could take place?
This is one that they have to do to get out of the box.
Okay, all right.
They need to trade Taylor and Warren for a first-round draft pick. To get out of the box, they need a quarterback. So you do what needs to be done. You make a blockbuster trade. That solves your problem if it goes right now. You don't have to wait 2 years, 3 years. You get the first-round draft pick next year. You get a quarterback that fast. What do you think, Jake?
Mike, how old a fella are you?
I'm 94 years old, Jake.
94 years old?
Yes, I am.
Well, when's your 95th birthday?
March.
March what?
March the 10th.
March the 10th. I'll tell you what, Mike, I'm going to make an offer to you here. You ready? Now, it's not going to be on your birthday because I assume you've got friends and family far more important in the grand scheme than I. But I had a really good buddy, about 4 years ago.
Okay.
And he was 89 years old, and he sits me down, and he says, Jake, I got an important question for you. And I said, okay. And he said, it's a really important matter, kind of like your trade here, Mike, right? And I said, okay. And he said, I had a pact with my buddies that when we turned 90, we'd all go to St. Elmo's Steakhouse and have steak dinner to celebrate 90th birthday. And unfortunately, he outlasted him, right? Yes. And he said, so on my birthday, will you take me to St. Elmo's Steakhouse for my 90th birthday? I said, it'd be my honor. And we had an unbelievably great dinner at St. Elmo's Steakhouse. So, Mike, here's the deal. In March, I want to take you to the restaurant of your choice, and I just want to have lunch with you or dinner with you to celebrate your 95th birthday.
Hey, Jake, I'm going to tell you something else. I played for Tony Hinkle years ago, and he only had one factor that he stressed. It was turnovers. That's the only stat that Tony Hinkle kept. We called them errors back then. They're turnovers now. But the day after the game, we went down on the board, all we had after our name was errors.
Now, Mike, which sport did you play? Because Tony taught 3 of them. Coached 3 of them.
Basketball in 1951, 52, and 53. In fact, I was on the all-Hoosier team when Indiana played Purdue and Notre Dame. That was back in 1953.
Now, Mike, hang on. I'm going to put you on. Now, hold on. You didn't take up my offer here. I wanted to. You know what? We're not even going to wait till March. I want to take you out to lunch or dinner just to sit and hear your stories about Tony Hinkle and all of the things that you learned about the game of basketball.
I could give you some stories that shake your knees.
Well, I'll tell you what, Mike, my knees shake anyway, Mike. I do 3 hours on the radio, and I fear public speaking. But I'm going to put you on hold right now, and Kurt's responsibility here is to get your phone number because you and I are going to go solve the world's problems because I love it. I would rather – Mike, I appreciate that you listen to this show. I want to listen to you for 3 hours. Literally want to listen to you for 3 hours. So, Mike, hang on. Kurt will get your information. Michael, real quick before we take a break, and Scott Agnes in just a couple minutes. Michael, what's up?
Thanks for having me on.
Your thoughts?
I can't stand it for multiple reasons. I mean, I would rather roll the dice with Ty Warren, quite frankly, at quarterback. I mean, I have three big issues besides the age. Is one, we're having issues up front with the offensive line. The guy can't move, right? Strike one. Strike two, we lose the RPO option that's been so successful earlier with JT. And then the third one, even in his prime, the one big knock on Philip Rivers was he couldn't throw the ball downfield. So we're losing Alec Pierce now because that's his big threat. So I don't know if the plan is maybe we get lucky and Defoe gets back and Sauce gets back, and maybe they hope he only can, we can win a couple 16-10, 17-14 games. But I would rather roll the dice with Ty Warren. I don't like it. But the optimistic side of me, maybe it works out and we can steamroll into the playoffs. Right? That's all you can ask for. And maybe he comes back for the first 4, 5, 6 games of next year and holds the fort down. From what I've been reading, best case scenario is Danny Dimes is going to have to start out on the PUP list. That's 6
I think
weeks,
that's right.
maybe throwing the
I think
bye.
that's right. If you heard Ralph Reef, Michael, I appreciate it. Ralph Reef saying earlier that he thinks that, in terms of Jones, that by, say, like the 9-month mark, he said he thinks that he could be moving around by May and then by September get out there, but you're starting to go up against the regular season. By the way, Mike, in terms of Butler-Hinkle, Mike, I don't think that trade proposal was ludicrous. Mike, I was ready to sit there and say a blockbuster trade, insane. Jonathan Taylor's a great player, and Tyler Warren is the one that I would hate to lose. But I think if they think, and only they know, at the quarterback spot with Richardson and Jones what they have in-house, but if they think they've got to go that route, then you're setting yourself back 3 years anyway. And Jonathan Taylor, at that point, the timelines don't line up. They dealt Marshall Faulk for 2 and a 5 when Peyton Manning was coming in, and that seemed ludicrous at the time, right? I don't think that was a ludicrous idea, Mike. And I like you thinking outside the box. So, Tony Hinkle does not score, Mike, you with an error in that call. We will continue the conversation. Scott Agnes, recap on what happened last night next. when he was going over a production meeting, he said he learned that Phillip Rivers and the high school football team that Phillip Rivers coaches runs the same offensive scheme as that of the Indianapolis Colts, and routinely would talk to Shane Steichen about the scheme itself. So that sounds to me like a plug-and-play guy, even though he is starting out on the practice squad. And yes, if you were just joining us, if he in fact does suit up on Sunday against a tenacious Seattle defense, then that will reset the clock for his Hall of Fame eligibility back to 5 years. Now, Mark Dykton, who you hear in the morning show, had a really good point that said the Colts should force the NFL now to break protocol to flex the Colts-Seahawks game into the Sunday night game so that way Phillip Rivers can get a longer daytime nap. Excellent point. Also, several have pointed out that it appears as though Butler Hinkle Mike did not want to have lunch with me. Kind of seemed that way, didn't it? When I was like, Mike, I want to have lunch with you, and he didn't seem overly enthusiastic. I can't say I blame him, right, for not jumping at the opportunity. Last night at the Fieldhouse, Russell Westbrook, you better hope, you Colts fans, you better hope that Russell Westbrook leaves behind whatever it was that he put in his water for Phillip Rivers, because last night it was vintage Russell Westbrook. He had a triple-double, but the Pacers did get the win. And they're starting to get contribution from guys that you didn't even know who they were 3 months ago. Joining us now on the Java House Peel and Pour guest line from Fieldhouse Files, Scott Agnes, to talk about the Pacers. Scott, I don't know if you heard, and maybe I've already introduced it to you once or thrice, but have you heard the new queryism that I came up with, empty calories, guys? Have you heard this one yet?
I don't think I have yet.
Okay. So, as you know, and these I did not trademark because I've got enough trademark battles going on right now with my legal team.
I love it. Good for you.
But 2025 guy, you know that. We've gone over that a lot. That is a guy that is destined to score 20 a game on a 25-win team for the majority of his career, okay? Another term that I have come up with is now an empty calories guy. And that is a guy that, if you think about the post-brawl Pacers, some of the players that they acquired through different means that came in and you thought to yourself like, oh, you know, this is somebody they might be able to get some good minutes out of or some future with. Ike Diagu comes to mind, okay? Then you realize that they're just empty calories. It's like when you're hungry and you go and you grab a bag of chips, you're not getting anything nutritional out of that that's going to help you long run. You just needed something in the short spurt to fill you up. The Pacers right now have some guys on their roster that could be empty calorie guys. You think to yourself like, oh, wow. But then we are going to retroactively look back and realize they were just guys that were there because they needed someone to log minutes and play out the roster. Does this team right now have any of those true guys, or is Rick Carlisle starting to turn them into form a little bit into a team that suddenly is somewhat competitive and has a pulse?
Yeah, I think mainly, Jake, what they have done is make do with role players, and they're asking role players to take on much larger roles. Like, I don't think Ethan Thompson, for example, is one of your empty calorie guys. He's a guy that hadn't got that opportunity, but now has, and in a week has gone from two-way contract to has never played before to not just in the starting lineup last night, but finish the game, which is obviously way more important and was impactful in those minutes. Same thing with Garrison Matthews. He knows his role. It's to knock down shots and provide depth at that guard position. And I thought last night was the epitome of what this team needs in the short term until they get more guys back, and that's from Siakam, Matherin, and Nembhard to play big minutes, and then everybody else fills a spot and helps along the way. Last night was a game against a good team that big run in the third quarter would have cost you, but they were able to make it up against a bad team in that fourth quarter and finish strong.
Okay, I want to touch on two guys, and for those that are not familiar with or have not watched the Pacers a lot lately, Ethan Thompson's a young guy. I think Oregon State. Am I right in that?
Yes.
I thought last night he got the start, and late in the game, there were 3 plays, Scott, in the fourth quarter of that game, inside of 5 minutes left. Almost three consecutive trips where he either worked his way in for a defensive rebound, or kept loose balls alive just strictly with hustle plays. And, I mean, it jumped out a little bit, and it kept them on a couple of possessions. It kept Indiana – Sacramento looked like they were going to be able to get a putback, and then, boom, Ethan Thompson comes in kind of out of nowhere and is able to stave kind of a Kings moment, if you will. Now, is that simply a young guy that is doing what he can to stay on the floor, or is that part of his game that is exactly the reason that he's there?
I would say it's a little bit of both. The main reason they brought him in is because he's a guard who can shoot it, but I think he's a perfect example, and this is what you got to stress to so many of these college kids and guys that were always the star, right? Middle school, high school, maybe once they get into college. In the pros, it's the 1%. And so be T.J. McConnell. Star in whatever you can. And so while we know Ethan Thompson and Garrison Matthews can knock down threes, that's why they were brought in large part. Thompson's been on quite a scoring run in the G League and was with them in Summer League a couple of years ago. So he's been on the Pacers' radar for quite a while. But more than that, I just applaud Thompson, Jake, for, all right, this is a time offensively where you're looking for the big three with Mathurin, Siakam, and Nembhard. So go find a way to be useful. And this team had 1 offensive rebound in the first half. They had 7 in the fourth quarter, and he had 3 of them. And I think that's the way you continue to earn this two-way contract.
Matthews is a guy that when I watch, and I'm simply going off tea leaves here, right? I'm watching, just kind of reading what is being said or listening when Carlisle is on with, our guys on the Fan Morning Show, listening to what is said, and then watching rotation. It seems to me, even though he did not shoot the ball well initially when coming to Indiana, that Rick Carlisle really likes Garrison Matthews and likes having him in rotation. Your thoughts?
Yeah, that's what it seems as well. That's been the impression I've gotten as well. Because after that first stint, it was not impressive. I think he was like 3 for 17 with 9 points. And then they signed. I didn't think they'd probably sign him to a second 10-day contract. They did, and he's rewarded them. I think he had like 10 first-half points in his first game on that second 10-day contract. And by the way, I should clarify here for the audience, they'll have a decision to make on him because players can only sign up to 2 10-day contracts per team per season. And so he's obviously on the second one there. They are getting some positive injury updates in the short term and long term. But right now, I've gotten that impression. And I think the other thing is we got to take into account is Garrison was just thrown into this, right? No training camp, like maybe 1 practice. And for how much this Pacers team wants to play, and so much of them can rely on the familiarity and continuity, but not the couple of players that they continue to bring in. And so I think he really took about those 10 days to settle in and now has a much better understanding of what is being demanded of him.
Is J. Huff settling in?
I think so. I think we've seen that over the last couple of weeks. I still believe he's a adequate backup. I have not seen starter potential, a guy that you want to play 35 minutes per game. But I think like we talked about last week, if he can be that 18 minutes per game guy, give you 8 points, 5 rebounds, 3 blocks, I think that's exactly why they went out and got him. But that the center position as a whole remains unsettled to this point. But that's been the least of their worries given their injuries elsewhere.
Scott, when I look, Scott Agnes is my guest. He's on the Java House Peel and Pour guest line, Fieldhouse Files, of course, his work. This week is such a weird week because you're void of NBA games to a large extent over the course of the week because of the fact that it is now into that point of, and you remember how kind of surreal it was, and it was really the introduction for the Pacers on the national stage in getting to the finals of the in-season tournament. And it felt like at that time, and this is my question for you, in that first year of the in-season tournament, I thought to myself, this worked. People are talking about this. This feels like a big deal. It's cool. It's super fun to have these games be relevant. But the Pacers were an integral part of it because they got to the championship of it. Is it now, I hate to say it this way, has it run its course? Was there more hype about it in year one across the board, or did we just feel that way because Indiana was involved in it? Has it lost any steam?
I think it's been a missed opportunity, Jake. I think the courts are so bad that it turns people off.
Totally.
And I am 100% in that boat. If there's a game going on and it's a bright purple court, honestly, I have no interest in watching. It's too distracting. I think they get rid of the gimmicks, they push it back later in the season, then it has a lot more validity. But right now, when you're playing about a month ago, like 2 weeks into the season, and you're already playing these cup games with these huge implications, and more so these players wanting to get that additional bonus money, I think that's far too soon to do that. And also, you got to keep in mind, you're going against the prime NFL season when that is. I make this more popular, putting it off when more people are able to watch it. But I do agree. I think we were way more in tune and locked in on it because of the Pacers' success in year one. Plus, the first couple of years, there's great intrigue about what is this and why are they doing this and what is this about? Do players care? It turned out they did care about the bonus money. It's great if your team can reach it. If not, I think all the teams are grateful because now they play about 2 games in the next 10 days and can utilize this as a mini week to get back to practice, because already it's sad. Teams have gotten to the point where they're just not practicing very often, and I think they all could use some of that time.
Man, I'll tell you what, the courts are terrible, right?
Awful.
I mean, honestly, Scott, there are, and I don't know if that's, I think initially that was designed so that if like you were walking through a sports bar and you looked up, you knew that like, oh, this is different. You know what I mean? Like this must be an in-season tournament game. And now I watch it. You can't even – there was one of them, and I can't recall which game it was this year. The Pacers were in one of them, and I couldn't even see the rim. It was like the way that on television, it looked like I was watching Atari. It was awful.
Here's my other argument. Why do we make the cup courts in the cup feel way more important than the NBA Finals, Jake? You watch the NBA Finals, there's no marking physically on the court that is the finals. Now, I think they've come out and since said, all right, we didn't realize this was a
Scott,
big issue.
I got to tell you, Kurt Gerald's is filling in for Eddie. Eddie Garrison today, by the way, is up in LaPorte. If you have his number, Scott, wish him good luck. I hooked up Eddie with a marketing deal here. He's on his way to LaPorte as part of the Big Head Association. He's a finalist to become a head model for a hat company that needs to make 8 5/8 hats, and Eddie's like in the whatever the 1 percentile of people with heads that big, and so he's on his way for the BHA to compete. So wish him the best of luck. That's why he's out today. But Kurt Gerald's, when Scott just said that, you literally just you did like you jumped up and you prayed to the sky in thanks, right?
Yes, because I missed the NBA Finals courts that had the big trophy right there in the middle of the
They're
logo.
doing
and all
it now,
that.
Scott. Aren't they returning it?
Yes, that was one of the many things that have changed. We've also seen some of the national broadcasters lean into showing the national anthem and team introductions. We see that in the NFL. We have not seen it in the NBA. And I think to the point earlier, though, by adding that on the court, it adds some big game feel. I never liked that they advertised NBA Summer League in the WNBA season during the finals. The showcase should be this. This is their best product. This is what it should be all about. And so they listened to a lot of feedback during the finals last year, even showing the intros and national anthem. And so I just feel like they've invested more in the cup than the finals, which is their quality product.
Now, Scott, here's the $1 million question. I'm going to let you, Scott Agnes, be the judge and jury on this personal anecdote of my life. You ready?
Got it.
I've got to check and make sure that I'm correct, because the season schedule is weird because of the in-season tournament. Like, for example, now the Pacers are next in Philadelphia, correct?
Yes.
And that was not, if you have like a preseason schedule that was printed out, that doesn't show. It fluctuates. See, boom, here we go.
You would only have 80 of 82 games that were known in August, right?
Okay, so I was wrong about this. I thought the Bucks were at home on Friday night, but they are not now. Shannon and I are doing our annual trip. We spend a weekend in Milwaukee every year at Christmas time just to get away, go to dinner, shop, whatever else. And she was asking what sort of new things we can do in Milwaukee. And then I was wondering, do you think, considering that we are fortunate enough to go to Pacer games here and go to all of them, if I went out of town, would it be lame then if we went to a Bucks game?
Only if you love doing it. I don't think it would be lame if you like to experience new venues, new sites. I'm a geek about that type of thing, but purely for just going there, I think there are way other things I'd get involved with before I do that. But there's an incredible Deer District that could lead as the pregame, postgame, have a nice dinner there. The Fiserv Forum's really the center hub for all that. So
that they've got a Christmas market one of those deals in the Deer District right out front of it. So I think we're doing that. So that's as close as we're going to get. But I thought they were at home. They're not at home this weekend. So it's a moot point. But is the arena nice? The Bucks Arena?
It is. Yeah. It's one of those that, in the fun fact that you'll appreciate, the first opponent to ever play there was the Pacers. They were their opening night for that venue back in what feels like 2017, maybe.
You know my big fun fact about that arena that I've shared on this show many a times, including knocking out Joel Erickson with this fun fact. Do you know what was on the preview? What's that?
The Dahmer thing. I don't know a ton about it, but isn't it the Dahmer story?
So Jeffrey Dahmer, the chocolate factory where he worked, was located on the site that is now Fiserv Arena. So they not because of Dahmer, but years later, after all of that went down, the chocolate factory where he worked was torn down. They eventually built the arena, and the very first event of the arena was a concert, and it was the Violent Femmes and the Killers. True story. How about them apples?
That's You're
Fine
all about the
Fine Young
facts.
Cannibals booked. For what it's worth.
How was your other last big trip?
Oh, it's great.
Overseas.
We went to Vienna and Munich. I went to Vienna, Salzburg, and Munich. And let me tell you, Scott, I've never been one. I'll tell you this. There were a lot of people that were going to Vienna, Austria, because they're known for those Christmas markets, Christmas marts, whichever way you want to call it. Carmel, of course, is now really known for it. We just went to the one at the Rathskeller, which was awesome this past Saturday night. If nobody has been down to the Athenaeum to go down for that, it is also very cool. And those things are kind of funny because, like, you go through them and you realize by the time you go to one of the little kiosk things, you're like, yeah, these are really like the same four things, but there's 150 of them. But so I kind of wondered why that wasn't why we went to Vienna, but Vienna is known for them, and we were there for the opening weekend of them. And there were a lot of people from around Europe that were there for that. And I thought that was kind of weird. And then we went through the big one in like the downtown, and they have like a lazy river, except for that it's now ice. And so it's like an ice skating path that goes through the whole thing. It was magical. I mean, honestly, it was like you could have had that in the middle of July and you would have felt in the Christmas spirit. That part of it was very, very cool. It was cool.
That was such a good
trip.
idea. I feel like going over to do an Oktoberfest
is
up there on the bucket list
Totally.
to experience there. And it's earlier. I've learned it's earlier than you would imagine out there, too.
Correct. Oktoberfest is actually late September, which is weird. And I'll tell you this, Munich, we were only in Munich for 2 days. And again, I know that we're very fortunate to be able to do that, and I'm extremely grateful for that. But Munich blew me away, Scott. I don't know what I was anticipating. I thought I was expecting it to be like this kind of like stuck in the 70s type, robotic type city, and it was beautiful. Munich was awesome. Munich was a great city. So we had a great time. It was definitely fun. And then came back and, been able to watch the Pacers kind of uptick it a little bit, obviously last night with their win against Sacramento. And now up next, Philly is tomorrow night. Is that correct? Or is it Friday?
No, Friday. They got 3 days between games.
Friday in Philly is up next. All of it will be covered at Fieldhouse Files with Scott Agnes, who's on the Java House Peel and Port guest line. Scott, appreciate it as always, man.
You bet. Thank you, Jake.
All right, Scott Agnes joining us again. The other two big stories of the day, one of them, which I never really got to, was I thought it was interesting. I'll simply say this. The Notre Dame athletic director basically calling out the ACC and saying, look, the ACC has really compromised our relationship with them. And I understand it. And I want Notre Dame people to understand. I totally get where you're coming from. I think Notre Dame is absolutely one of the 8 best teams in college football, let alone top 12. I absolutely do. But at the same time, I also understand, I'm not saying I support it, but I understand the hard line in the sand that the college football committee basically laid out for Notre Dame, which was if you don't want to join a conference, that's fine. That's fine. Just know that you're going to put yourself in position where you're going to have to work extra hard versus everyone else. It's kind of like, I was going to make a bad example there about like 2A versus 6A schools, whatever. I don't want to do that but the reality is if you're a basketball player, Seton Catholic for Desmond Bain. If Desmond Bain had been that exact same player with the exact same statistics at Newcastle or Muncie Central or Anderson or Center Grove, he would have been way more on the radar than he was at Seton Catholic. When you're at a smaller school like that, you just got to work a little bit. Not work a little bit harder is the wrong way of saying it, but you get what I'm saying. You got to publicize a little bit more. And for Notre Dame, in this circumstance, they're the biggest brand in college football. Everybody knows that. But when you stand on your own and you don't go into a conference, that's their prerogative, and they don't need to be in a conference for any reason other than the committees telling them repeatedly over the course of a decade and a half, and the athletic directors telling them repeatedly over the course of a decade and a half, eventually your decision to stand on your own and not play in the sandbox with other kids is going to be one that the judgment day is going to come for us. And that's what happened. And so for the athletic director at Notre Dame to now call out the ACC, because they have a partnership with the ACC, a scheduling partnership with the ACC, and for him to say, because the ACC was making the case for Miami and not for Notre Dame, and Notre Dame got offended by that and said, this has really done terrible damage to the relationship between us and the ACC. I get it. And I get that for 99% of their existence, Notre Dame has the clout to be able to make that and draw that line in the sand. But now, for the very first time, and I know change is hard. I know it. I know it all too well. I don't like change. But for the very first time, some of that power now exists within the conferences and not with Notre Dame. And that's a hard pill to swallow, but it's also a realistic one. Phillip Rivers, the other big story of the day. He is now signed with the practice squad for the Colts. Will he play on Sunday? Stephen Holder, ESPN, joins us next. for 25% off, or simply use the bundle, the fan bundle, which includes the Wrangler energy drink and the liquid hydration. Perfect after a workout, and the Colombian coffee. Steven, let's get right to this. Is Phillip Rivers going to start for the Colts on Sunday?
Well, first off, he and I both need some coffee, it sounds like. So that's a great idea, number one. Number two, will he start this weekend? I think the answer is TBD. And that's an honest answer, both from me and the Colts, I think, because there is still some potential for Riley Leonard to get back out there. I don't know what his status is. It's been described as week to week, but this is certainly a desperate situation. Maybe he tries to push it. I don't know. And I don't know that the Colts know. I was told that we will know more within maybe the next 24 hours. So we wait and we let that play out. But I think the Colts going out and looking at other options tells you a lot about the situation, right? It tells you that they are at least somewhat doubtful about Riley Leonard playing, or at least concerned, maybe is the better word. If they thought this was something he could push through, we wouldn't be here. So I think we'll have to wait and see. But the odds are, I would say, it's not off the table, certainly.
Okay, what is the motivation here?
For the Colts or for Phillip Rivers?
Both.
That's fair. Well, the Colts, the motivation is we're desperate. They are trying to make the playoffs. I think the alternative is for them, right, is, okay, we sit here and we just let this, slip away. Whether we think they have a legitimate shot is not the question, right? It's about how you react to this desperate situation. If you just sit here and say, all right, well, we'll just find whoever's out there on the couch. I guess they did that with Phillip Rivers, but whatever, a more predictable guy on the couch who really gives you no shot. You're not really trying, I guess, is what they might presume there. This, while I don't know if it's going to work, I cannot even begin to speculate if it will work, but they believe it gives them a fighting chance. And I think this really boils down to he can function quickly and make quick decisions and deliver the football. He's throwing the ball fine from what I'm hearing. Is he in football shape? Not really. Is he up for taking the punishment? I don't know about that, but certainly he can come in, know the offense. Anyone else you get off the street isn't going to know the offense and have the history with Shane Steichen that Phillip Rivers has, which is 6 years of working with him. That is substantial. He can come in and he can operate, and that won't be a problem. And that is like half the battle for a quarterback you sign off the street. For what's the motivation for Phillip Rivers? That's a tougher question, frankly. I got to think a lot of this is I'm doing what I can to help my friend, and that is Shane Steichen. These guys, I don't think people understand. They are very close. Like they are. He is one of. And
that
Shane
goes
Steichen's
back,
best
by
friends.
the way, just to not to cut you up there, Stephen. I apologize, but for those listening, because it's an easy thing to get confused by. When Phillip Rivers was here before, he had Frank Reich. He did not have Shane Steichen. He worked with Shane Steichen with the Chargers, correct?
Yes, that is correct. So Shane Steichen's formative years in the NFL were basically all spent with the Chargers. He went there as kind of a glorified intern, I believe, in 2013, and he spent 6 seasons there with Rivers. And when Rivers left, I should say, or his final season, I believe it was Shane's first season as offensive coordinator. So he worked very closely with him, including as, I believe, quarterbacks coach and receivers coach for a while. So they have a lot of history. They're going to know how each other think, how each other operate. Steichen references Phillip Rivers all the time. So there's a synergy there. So I guess that's a big part of it. Again, he's helping his friend out, and I guess he's willing to put his body on the line for it. A good friend, I guess.
The reality is this, Stephen. The Colts are let's go to say it this way. Stephen Holder, my guest, ESPN.com. In your opinion, the Colts are how many wins from securing a playoff spot?
Well, securing is a tricky word. I think they believe 2 wins gives them a shot, like a legit shot. But I think at that point you're probably left hoping that a couple of other teams do you some favors. To really control your destiny, the way things are going, like the Chargers winning last night doesn't help. That gets them, I think, to 9 wins, and they're in the wild card. So I really think if the 9-win teams split the rest of their games, right, that gets them to 11. So you're fighting for that last spot. Are you going to get it with 10 wins? I don't know. I'm not sure.
Do they make this move? I'm asking this not rhetorically, but legitimately asking, okay?
Yeah.
Does Chris Ballard make this move if he is 100% confident and convinced that he is back next year regardless of the outcome of this one?
I mean, maybe. And here's why. Because now, I will grant you that is it's probably some extra sauce here, okay? Let's be honest. No one's job, whether it's Chris Ballard or whoever's starting at position X, no one's job is really safe ever in the NFL. So you're always straining and striving, to get every morsel you can. So that's the nature of the NFL. But I do think certainly you could make the argument. I don't know. Look, we're speculating. We can make the argument that their jobs were on the line a year ago, and this has taken a turn for the worst. You can't lose all of your second half games and expect to not have to answer for that, right? So I think that there has to be at least some thought to, look, we got to do what we got to do. And then you also owe it to your players. That's the other part of this. You owe it to your players to do everything you can and to do what you think is best. And that is what they're doing here, right or wrong, better or worse. I think that's a big part of it.
Okay, let me ask you the other side of that, Stephen. Do you believe, and I know this is going to sound like I'm grasping at straws, okay, which is what I do. You mentioned extra sauce, okay? If they had not made the trade for Sauce Gardner and they knew that they still had a first-round pick and they knew that they had a quarterback that they drafted a handful of years ago that they still don't know who he is, and they have another quarterback that looked like he was going to be perhaps the guy. Fortunately, I hate to say it that way, they had not re-signed or they had not signed him to a long-term deal before this injury. We don't know his status for next year. If they were in play looking at it saying, if we miss the playoffs, at least we have a first-round pick to fall back on to bolster ourselves or put ourselves back in position, does that now become meaningless so you may as well push all in because you already sent your next 2 years first-round picks elsewhere?
Well, I would say the only thing I'd say that is something to consider. Now, the only thing I'd say is that they're already at 8 wins. They are not going to have. They were never going to have some sort of top 10 pick.
Fair.
Even if they kept their first-round pick. So that's the only thing that's sort of a disincentive. If you're picking in the middle, I always feel like if you're picking 15th, you might as well pick like 22nd.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And it's kind of like flavors at that point. The real difference makers, at least the obvious difference makers, the ones that we can tell like halfway through their senior season, those are the guys that go in like the top 5 or 10. So anyhow, I guess I would say I don't think it factored that much because I don't think it's going to impact their draft pick that much. Their figurative draft pick had they had.
Right. I mean, that Stephen, it's just so easy to forget that they don't have a first-round pick the next 2 years. But let's get to that situation before we let you go here. Phillip Rivers is, by the way, if you're just joining us on the program, Phillip Rivers signed to the practice squad. Who was on did they have to make room on the practice squad for him? Or was Brett Rippon lifted up and that created the spot?
That is a good question. Those machinations, I think, are still being worked out because we haven't gotten like official notification of the signing. So that sort of other transaction, corresponding transaction, I guess, that usually happens when the actual signing happens, and that hasn't happened yet that I'm aware of. So we will see.
I mean, doesn't it feel like Phillip Rivers ain't coming here on a practice squad unless he knows he's going to play? I mean,
well, I think there's certainly a good chance of him playing, right? I mean, he didn't come here to hold Riley Leonard's hand.
That's what I mean.
You know, he is,
like
by the way,
he ain't coming here to be Don Strock, right?
Correct, right. I think that's fair. I do think that's fair. I do know, I should say, that like Riley Leonard's not ruled out. So in a perfect world, Riley Leonard plays on Sunday. As much as we might think Riley Leonard against the Seahawks, come on. I mean, Phillip Rivers, 44 years old, 5 years retired against the Seahawks, come on, right? Like they're both ridiculous. But I do think Riley at least gives you a chance because he's been doing this, right? He's been doing it all along, and he may not have the institutional knowledge of Phillip Rivers, but certainly he has, 23-year-old legs, and that gives you something to work with. But by the way, you may already know this, but like a subplot to all of this is that Riley Leonard and Phillip Rivers are very close. I don't know if you know that, but like
he tutored him along with Drake May up into the draft process, correct?
Yeah, and Riley is actually from Alabama, not far from where Phillip lives, down on the coast. So just kind of just
is that so? Do you believe that is that coincidence or is that direct tie?
I think coincidence. I do think where there is a possible tie is the fact that they drafted Riley Leonard, because you and I can easily draw the dots there, right? Like certainly Shane Steichen and Chris Ballard, they certainly connected with Phillip Rivers before drafting Riley Leonard, because of course they did. And so those conversations and impressions, I am sure, informed their opinions of Riley Leonard before drafting him. So that's where I think there's a connection.
Okay, Stephen, let's get to a health standpoint before we let you go here. First off, we'll begin with Sauce Gardner and where things stand there.
Yeah, I don't know that we see him this week, but the goal is to have him back in the next few weeks. So I think next week is probably where we start having a realistic conversation about that. So we will see. But they could really use him in light of what's going on with Mooney Ward.
Okay, that's the other one, Mooney Ward. I have serious concerns about this, and I don't mean, Stephen, from a football standpoint. I'm talking about any time that you have a player who psychologically has had some of the, the emotional challenges that he's had, understandably, justifiably so, with personal loss a year ago, but then not one, not two now, but 3 concussion protocol visits in the course of a regular season. You got to start thinking about it, don't you?
Oh, 100%. I think every possible outcome is on the table with Mooney Ward. And, they haven't really, not to minimize this, right? We're talking about a young man's, his brain, frankly. We're talking about his brain and his future as a father and what have you. So I would say, however, a related note is that they have not really had any luck at all with their big dollar signings. I mean, their 3 most, I think, highest paid players on defense are all hurt at the same time. Sauce Gardner, Mooney Ward, and DeForest Buckner. So, I mean, just an unfortunate series of events. But they have the football gods clearly hate them.
Yeah. Okay, DeForest Buckner, where do things stand there?
Close. I think this week is probably pushing it, but I bet he comes back for the 49ers game next week. That's kind of where my sense is right now. But this week hasn't been ruled out either, so we will see. He is definitely close. The lesson I take from DeForest Buckner is that stem cells real, because he's done it twice now and has recovered when he could have had a season-ending injury. So.
From a you were talking about, Mooney Ward, concussion protocol. I know Alec Pierce was one that we thought might go into that turned out to not be the case. But I'm curious if this, Stephen, may be conversation for a later time. But does the quarterback uncertainty for next year factor in to Alec Pierce and his desire to re-sign here as opposed to going into free agency across the board?
It would for me. I mean, let's be honest, right? Who's your quarterback next year, Alec? I don't know. That's where I think it matters on both sides, right? Like if you're the Colts and you aren't sure what you're working with next year, are you also as motivated to pay what it's going to take
to keep Alec Pierce, because I know they had come around to that when they thought he'd be paired with Daniel Jones. That is not likely to be the case now, regardless of how optimistic a fan you are. I'm telling you right now, Daniel Jones is not going to be the starting quarterback at the start of next season. That seems extremely unlikely, right? So,
do you think he'll be under contract at the start of next season?
Oh man, that is a tougher question. I think the odds are decent, but it will take a different form. It has to, right? I mean, you can't give him some sort of franchise quarterback contract when he's not going to play perhaps for the first year. I don't know how you handle it. I really don't. It's gonna cost him money. It's going to cost the Colts in terms of certainty, what they're signing up for. It's just a completely imperfect situation. The alternative, and maybe this doesn't get people excited, the alternative is go all in on Anthony Richardson. Maybe you trim the roster a little bit, trim some fat from the roster, you pare things down, give Anthony Richardson a shot, see what happens there. Even if you move on from him, at least he benefits by getting to show himself for free agency, and then you regroup in 2027. But I mean, we're so far off from that, I can't even begin to think about it. But those are some of the actual scenarios that are going to be in play.
Okay. Lastly, Stephen, be honest. Okay, I want you to roll up your sleeve and put truth serum in your vein. You ready?
All right, I'm ready.
Did your alma mater, Miami, deserve to get in above Notre Dame?
Yes. Now, here's the deal. I think their losses were very comparable. They were. So if you can disagree with that, but if you agree with that, well then, and then you look at head to head, then what are we talking about, right?
Well, the fact that Miami somehow mysteriously vaulted them when both of them were idle, right? Isn't that what happened?
Well, sure, but then I think the bigger question is why was there the separation to begin with? I think is the bigger question, right? And I think that's the thing that the committee has to do a better job of explaining, because they still haven't, right? So it's like the head-to-head didn't matter until it did. So I don't know. The process is flawed. I do agree with some of the takes I've heard about having the two, is it group of five teams in there. I think that maybe should be looked at, because I mean, let's be honest. Congrats to James Madison. I don't know, man. I just don't know. I think they lost.
Who did Miami lose
Louisville.
to? Who were Miami's losses?
Louisville and SMU.
Come on.
Both of which.
That's not comparable. And I realize one of them, the irony here, and the thing that makes it murky is one of Notre Dame's losses is to Miami. But Miami and Texas A&M in the first 2 weeks, both on the road, are less egregious than. And I mean, those aren't, SMU and Louisville aren't terrible, but they're not great losses.
Yeah, I would say I think it's after that the number of ranked opponents at the time that they played them. I believe Miami had the edge there. So like there's always arguments that you can counter with, and you can do it all day long, right?
Now Miami plays who in the playoffs? Are
they play Texas A&M?
Yeah, so they're
on the road. So it's a tough one. It's
okay,
tough one.
Yeah, they'll get beat.
And Miami, I will say, Miami has their offense has really found its stride, which I think is a product of Mario Cristobal shutting the hell up and letting his coordinator coach. But that's another story.
What's the name of that?
So we'll
what's the name of the stork?
Oh, the ibis.
The ibis, yeah.
Not
that's
stork.
But that's his name, the ibis bird, and that's because that's the bird that is always the last one to leave when a hurricane arrives and the first one to come back, right?
Legend has it, but I don't tend to stick around to find out. But that's what they say.
Yeah, the ibis has this figured out because he's like, I'm just going to put that in the PR release, and nobody knows the difference. Right. Nobody's sticking around to find out if I'm telling the truth or not, right?
Right. I was doing a little bird watching in the middle of a hurricane, and I noticed the ibis stuck around. Like, who discovered that?
Right.
Like, what idiot?
The ibis did. The ibis sent a press release because he was on top of it. He was at the forefront. It was like me. Trademarking Why Not Indiana. You gotta think ahead. What it wasn't raining when Noah built the ark. You know what I mean? You got to know what you're doing. All right, Stephen.
Some professor from the arts and sciences school, went out and did a research project in the middle of a hurricane. Apparently,
it was the one guy sticking around. They found his paperwork after the fact, but not the guy. Stephen, appreciate the time as always. I know you're busy, and we'll let you get back to work at ESPN.com.
All right, I'll see you soon.
All right, Stephen Holder joining us, Java House, Peel and Port Guest Line. J&V is up next. We will find out as part of our crossover brought to you by the good guys at Love Heating and Air. Love-HVAC.com is the website. 317-353-2141. We'll see what he's got shaking next. He will be up next with you, obviously. Thank you to Scott Agnes. Thank you to Ralph Reef. Thank you to Stephen Holder for their time today. Also to Kurt Geralds for filling in while Eddie Garrison is on his way to the photo shoot. Have not heard yet from Eddie whether or not he was selected as part of the Big Head Association for their shoot for the Big Cranium contest in terms of the 8 5/8 hat model.
What kind of photo shoot are we talking about with him?
He kind of like George Costanza is a hand model, apparently there is a hat corporation that needs big heads. And he was going for a photo shoot to that to try to get royalties for it. So we wish him the best of luck with
hula hoop
that.
of hats right there.
That's right. J&V is obviously here. It is the crossover brought to you by the good guys at Love Heating and Air, Love-HV, good ladies too. Love-HVAC.com is the website. John, what's cooking on the big show? Plenty of Phillip Rivers, right?
Plenty of Phillip Rivers conversation. IU stuff too. Matt Surface, former linebacker, is going to be on here. Charles Arbuckle, former Colts tight end. Radio network analyst, also going to be on here. So we got a lot of angles to hit on Phillip Rivers back after 5 years. We got anything comparable here? I know everybody's trying to be funny about it, so I want to go ahead and jump in too to try to be funny. Anything comparable to it?
It's a good question. I guess it would be
all those George Foreman comeback story kind of things, maybe back in the day.
I mean, I'm thinking maybe like late in his career, like when Allenser Jr. came back and ran the 500 another time, after.
Oh, you're talking about winning, though. I was just coming back in general after 5 years in a hiatus.
Yeah, I mean, that's.
You think this offensive line would be nice if they're better, too? Maybe protect him a little bit, not get him killed out there in the Pacific Northwest.
I mean, you worry about that, right? I mean.
And listen, there's 100% zero way this guy's going to sign after 5 years not doing it and not come out there and be the dude.
Oh,
there's no way.
Question.
No question. Way. Can you imagine? Well, I'm going to stand here on the sideline.
That's why I said he's not coming to be Don Strock, right?
Zero way. So I will say this. It makes it more interesting. It is more interesting than either Riley Leonard or Brett Rippon, but it's just kind of par for the Colts course here. That's what's so unfortunate.
John, I think it looks like a Hail Mary, doesn't it? It looks like a Hail Mary. I mean, it looks like they are throwing a desperate heave of like we are limping our way to.
They believe
a
that they're a decent quarterback away from still getting in this thing. I don't think they're doing it to save their own asses here. I just think they're doing it because they feel that around them, if they can get a competent quarterback play. Now, the problem is that Daniel Jones had zero mobility, and zero mobility is much better than a mobility you're going to get from 44-year-old Phillip Rivers. I mean, there's zero way about that. But, I mean, now all of a sudden, you couldn't adjust the passing game for Daniel Jones. Now you kind of got to adjust it a little bit for Phillip Rivers.
The one thing that I did see.
Josh Downs will get rediscovered again.
And J.J. Watt pointed out that Phillip Rivers was running for the high school team that he was coaching the exact same offensive scheme that Shane Steichen runs. So he's familiar with it, but still.
You got to protect your guy. I mean, you got to protect him. There's no doubt. I do find it interesting, though. I have a high level of interest in this, more so than I did going in. So,
well, you'll be interested in more of what John has to say.
It'll be like the first time if something works out for him like this, though.
That's true. He'll be with you till 6. We'll be back with you at noon tomorrow, and I thank you for listening to Query & Company.